Jason Arday, the Forrest Gump or Chauncey Gardner of Cambridge, has resigned under a perfect storm of plagiarism allegations and a fabricated CV. But this is not the end of the story. It is just the beginning. This is a national scandal involving our universities, DEI programs, the police, the BBC, and leading figures in academia, media, and politics. And it has exposed how rotten and incompetent they and our institutions are. Now, I won't bother to list all of Arday's boasts. You've heard them all before. The highlights, of course, are the 600 miles he ran in 6 days, which would put him into the elite tier of athletes, the 30 marathons he ran in 35 days, which raised £5 million, apparently, but for which there is no evidence whatsoever, his time at Crystal Palace Football Club, his appearance on the famous 7-Up documentary series, a TV show for which the basic requirement was to be alive 20 years before Arday was born. Then there's the charity work he did overseas, for a charity that never sends people overseas. And of course, there was the shoddy academic work and the lifting of huge chunks of text. Some call this plagiarism. As an academic, he was substandard. As a fantasist, he was a world champion. Now he is gone. That such a person was elevated far beyond his skill set by progressive liberals who were desperate to have him as their poster boy is one of the most shocking and depressing stories of our time. But it is understandable. He was to become their golden child, the intersectional icon who ticked all the right diversity and progressive boxes. Race, poverty, neurodivergent, illiterate until he was 18, a mute until he was 11, an unconventional childhood. He was the identity politics bingo card in human form. Of course, he simply had to be made Cambridge's youngest ever black professor. And once he was a professor, he simply had to be defended at all costs. The woke establishment had too much invested in him for him to fail. Just look at Cambridge. Cambridge is now in a major crisis of its own making. The reputation of one of the world's premier universities lies in tatters. Cambridge normally has a zero-tolerance attitude towards plagiarism. Yet it defended Arday and refused to investigate the allegations. It took 2 weeks of daily, devastating revelations in the Times, even in The Guardian and other papers, before Cambridge finally realised the game was up and it was forced to act. Too little, far too late. And for John Moore University in Liverpool, that granted Arday his PhD, it cleared him of the charge of plagiarism. But why? Because even progressive left-leaning academics have said parts of his thesis were clearly plagiarized in their opinion. When one sees the scale of the copying of other people's work in his thesis, it is unimaginable that a white academic would have been cleared. Is this the bigotry of low expectations? Why was he given the benefit of the doubt when others wouldn't be? John Moore and Cambridge University should both be in the dock. Our woke establishment should also be in the dock, because our woke elite in Britain has been utterly humiliated. The brains of leading figures of public life have been so addled by the woke mind virus that they simply couldn't or wouldn't see what everyone else could, that the emperor has no clothes. How could journalists like James O'Brien at LBC and Krishnan Gurumurthy at Channel 4, how could leading academics and so many Green and Labour MPs be taken in by Arday's outlandish claims? It's simple. They were mesmerised by the tale of a black boy who had overcome adversity. It's the virtue signalling equivalent of train spotters who get excited seeing the Flying Scotsman. Arday was their Flying Scotsman. He was the virtue signaller's poster boy. To see seasoned journalists who are trained to detect the faintest whiff of BS, to see them uncritically accept the bold boasts of their interviewee, reveals the devastating effect of ideological capture. Dare I say, brainwashing. Of course, people like James O'Brien have form here. Remember, O'Brien was a great champion of the convicted paedophile Carl Beech, the vile fantasist who claimed various upstanding public figures were involved in unspeakable crimes. O'Brien's personal biases clearly cloud his judgment. O'Brien's hubris prevents him from ever acknowledging his errors, and so even though others who have previously defended Arday have quietly removed their support, most recently the black president of Wolfson College, O'Brien, along with that other insane academic, Kehinde Andrews, remain chained to the foundering HMS Jason. He and many others willingly put their reputations on the line, instinctively circling the wagons around Arday without pausing for a second to consider whether any of the allegations might have some substance. A normal person would die from shame. But what these people and the rest of the woke establishment don't realise is that they are being unforgivably racist. Any white professor facing similar accusations to Arday would have been pilloried and investigated long ago. Arday's race is the reason the progressive left have become his Praetorian Guard. They are holding Arday to a lower standard because he is black. Surely that is, by definition, racist. But the national scandal spreads further still. This is truly devastating for nonsensical subjects such as Arday's own subject, critical race theory, a ridiculous field of study with no empirical or scientific foundation or basis. It is taught by substandard academics who spout complete drivel. Professor Jason Arday's academic output in critical race theory was excruciatingly bad, yet his superiors touted him as a world leader. Well, what a damning indictment of critical race theory that is. And it should sound the death knell for DEI programs across the country too, because perhaps the most serious question to arise from the Arday episode is this: how many other Jason Ardays are there out there? How many DEI academics, especially in the humanities and in sociology, but also how many DEI doctors, nurses, lawyers, engineers, architects, pilots should never have graduated and should never have been hired, whose CVs were never verified, never cross-checked? Arday was exposed because his claims were so bold, so blatant. But there could be thousands, tens of thousands of similarly unqualified figures who are more discreet, who have slipped by unnoticed, all hired and promoted despite any clear talent, with a lack of skill, no clear qualifications, despite the risk to their patients or their clients or their passengers. Institutions have willfully damaged their reputations simply to fill diversity quotas and be seen to embrace the latest fashion. Arday should sound the end of DEI and the ridiculous woke disciplines that feed it. This should lead to much soul-searching and root and branch investigations in universities, companies, and other organizations and institutions across the UK, across the USA, Canada, and everywhere else that has embraced this damaging policy of self-harm. But I suspect that's not going to happen. Our woke establishment have too much invested in this, and admitting the truth would be too humiliating. Heads also need to roll in the Metropolitan Police for trying to silence a reputable journalist at Times Higher Education. This is not the Daily Star, not the Sun or the Daily Mail. Times Higher Education is a very respectable, quite a boring and politically correct publication. What was the crime of this journalist? He politely emailed carefully crafted questions to the fantasist Arday asking about his career. Arday understandably panicked that he was going to be exposed. So what did he do? Well, he contacted the country's most powerful libel lawyers, and he contacted the police. He actually got the police to act as his enforcers. The police should have told him to get knotted, but they didn't. They took 4 months to deal with this case before finally dropping it. But chillingly, an officer warned the journalist, Grove, to cease all contact with Professor Jason Arday, citing negative impacts on the academic's mental health. Can you believe it? This outrageous attack on the freedom of the press, this attempt to silence a journalist, is deeply sinister. Taken all together, the universities, the DEI programs, the police, the BBC and others who were slow and reluctant to report on this story, the leading public figures in politics and the media and academia who defended him, I can't think of another incident which has so effectively exposed the corruption, the incompetence and the ideological capture of key British institutions and public figures. We often ask how Britain got so broken. We may well have found an answer. Thank you.